There is a moment, usually quiet, usually unplanned, when a person sits alone in a room they have sat in 1,000 times before, and suddenly feels like a stranger to their own life. The furniture is the same. The light through the window is the same. But something inside has shifted, so slowly that no single day could be blamed for it. And in that stillness, a question arrives, uninvited: who have I actually become? This moment does not ask for an answer right away. It simply asks to be noticed. And the people who notice it, really notice it, without flinching, without rushing to distract themselves, are the ones who end up aging with a strange kind of lightness that others can't quite explain. They seem calmer. Their eyes seem clearer. There's a stillness in how they speak, as if they've stopped performing for an audience that was never really watching that closely to begin with. So here is the promise of the next several minutes: you're going to walk through 9 truths, not comforting slogans, not motivational fluff, but real, sometimes uncomfortable realizations about the self, that quietly separate the people who grow old and bitter from the people who grow old and free. These aren't truths about diet or exercise or supplements. They're truths about the mind, about the ego, about the strange architecture of a human personality that spends decades building walls it doesn't even remember constructing. And by the end, you'll understand exactly which of these walls might still be standing in your own life, and what tends to happen, psychologically and emotionally, once a person finally lets them fall. Let's begin with the first truth, because it is the one that unlocks almost everything else. The first truth is this: you no longer need to be understood by everyone, and trying to be is what has been draining you. For most of a person's early life, there is an invisible tax paid to the opinions of others. You dress a certain way because of how it will be received. You choose words carefully in conversations, not because you're being thoughtful, but because you're managing an image. You avoid saying what you truly think because disagreement feels dangerous, like it might cost you something: a relationship, a reputation, a sense of belonging. This tax is paid quietly, for years, without most people ever calculating its true price. But somewhere around this stage of life, a strange kind of math starts happening. You begin to realize that the people whose approval you spent so much energy chasing were, in most cases, distracted by their own worries the entire time. They were not studying you as closely as you feared. And the ones who were studying you closely, waiting to judge, their judgment was never really about you either. It was a mirror reflecting their own unresolved insecurities. Once this becomes clear, something remarkable happens. The performance can stop. Not out of bitterness, not out of giving up on people, but out of a quiet recognition that being fully yourself, even if misunderstood, is far lighter than being constantly translated for an audience. Depth psychology has a name for the part of us that constructs this performance. It calls it the mask we wear to survive socially. But a mask worn for 60 years starts to feel like skin. Peeling it back doesn't happen in one dramatic moment. It happens gradually, in small refusals: refusing to explain yourself for the 10th time, refusing to shrink an opinion just to keep a room comfortable, refusing to apologize for taking up space with your own existence. This is not arrogance. It is closer to relief. The second truth follows naturally from the first, and it concerns the body. Your body is aging. This is undeniable, unstoppable, and, frankly, not worth fighting as though it were a personal insult. But here is what almost nobody tells you clearly enough: the part of you that notices the body aging is not itself aging in the same way. There is an observer inside you, the awareness that watches your thoughts, that feels your emotions rise and fall, that has been quietly present since childhood, and that observer does not have wrinkles. It does not have stiff joints. It has simply been watching, patiently, through every version of you that has ever existed: the child, the teenager, the young adult, the parent, the person you are now. Ancient philosophies built entirely around resilience made a similar distinction, separating what is truly yours to control from what merely happens to you. Your body happens to you. It is a vessel, remarkable and fragile, doing its best under the weight of time. But your capacity to notice, to reflect, to choose your response to circumstances, that is something else entirely, and it does not decline the way muscle tissue does. People who confuse themselves entirely with their bodies experience aging as a slow tragedy, a countdown, a series of losses. People who locate their identity in that quieter, watching part of themselves experience aging very differently, as a costume changing while the person underneath remains intact. This shift in identification is not denial. It is not pretending the body doesn't matter. It's simply refusing to let the body's timeline dictate the mind's verdict on a life well lived. The third truth is uncomfortable for a certain kind of person, especially anyone who built an identity around being knowledgeable, competent, or always right. The truth is this: you know far less than you once believed, and that admission is not a defeat, it is the doorway to actual peace. Ego, in its most basic form, is the part of the mind desperate to be certain, desperate to be the one who has it figured out. In youth, that desperation is almost useful, it drives ambition, it builds careers, it fuels the confidence needed to take risks. But dragged into later life unchanged, that same desperation becomes exhausting, for you and for everyone around you. There's a particular kind of freedom that arrives the moment a person can say, out loud, without flinching, I don't know, or I was wrong, or I've changed my mind. That freedom doesn't feel like loss. It feels like putting down a suitcase you didn't realize you'd been carrying your entire adult life, a suitcase filled with the need to win every argument, to have the last word, to prove a point nobody actually asked you to prove. The people who seem most at peace in later life are rarely the ones who know the most. They're the ones who've made friends with not knowing. They've stopped treating uncertainty as an enemy and started treating it as simply the honest condition of being human. The fourth truth is quieter, almost tender. Most of what disturbed you deeply in your younger years, the slights, the comparisons, the fear of falling behind, genuinely does not matter now, and seeing this clearly is not a loss of passion, it's a gain of clarity. There is a strange kind of grief that can surface here, because looking back honestly means admitting how much energy was spent on things that, in hindsight, carried almost no real weight. The promotion someone else got. The way a relative spoke at a family gathering 30 years ago. The imagined judgment of neighbors, co-workers, even strangers. None of it, examined now with clear eyes, deserved the emotional rent it was charged. But this recognition, instead of being painful, can actually become liberating, because it proves something important: the mind's sense of threat was never a reliable narrator. Most of what felt urgent was not actually important, and most of what felt embarrassing was, to everyone else, already forgotten within days. This truth doesn't ask you to regret the years spent worrying. It simply asks you to finally stop paying interest on debts that were cancelled long ago. The present moment does not require you to defend a version of yourself from 30 years back. It only asks what you'd like to do with the clarity you've earned. The fifth truth concerns other people, and it can be difficult to accept because it requires letting go of a very old hope. People, largely, do not change, not because they are incapable of change, but because change requires a depth of discomfort that most people, most of the time, are simply unwilling to sit with. For years, it's common to hold on to the quiet expectation that a difficult parent will eventually soften, that a distant sibling will eventually reach out, that a stubborn friend will eventually see things your way. And when that doesn't happen, disappointment repeats itself, again and again, like a wound that never fully closes because it's reopened by hope every single time. Accepting that people generally stay who they are, that their patterns, their defenses, their blind spots tend to remain remarkably consistent across a lifetime, is not cynicism. It's actually an act of compassion, both toward them and toward yourself. It means you stop waiting for someone to become a different person before you allow yourself to feel at peace. You start relating to people as they actually are, not as the improved version you've been quietly hoping for. This shift removes an enormous, invisible weight. Relationships stop being renovation projects and start being simply relationships, sometimes wonderful, sometimes limited, but no longer a source of constant, low-grade disappointment. The sixth truth builds directly on the fifth, and it's one of the hardest to say out loud. You are allowed to let go of people and spaces that drain you, even if you've known them your whole life, even if letting go makes you feel guilty. There's an unspoken rule many people absorb early on, that loyalty means staying, no matter the emotional cost, no matter how many decades a relationship has been quietly extracting more than it gives. But loyalty to a pattern that harms your peace isn't virtue, it's habit dressed up as obligation. At this stage of life, time has a different weight than it once did, not in a morbid sense, but in a practical one. Every conversation that leaves you smaller, every gathering that leaves you exhausted rather than nourished, every relationship maintained purely out of guilt rather than genuine connection, is quietly stealing something that cannot be replaced. This doesn't mean cutting people off dramatically or holding grudges. It often means something much gentler, simply reducing the energy given to what drains, and increasing the energy given to what genuinely restores. It means understanding that protecting your peace in your later years is not selfish. It is, in fact, one of the most responsible things you can do, both for yourself and for the people who actually deserve your presence, the fully engaged, unresentful version of you, not the depleted one showing up out of obligation. The seventh truth challenges something many people carry as an unquestioned assumption, that youth was happiness, and that happiness is therefore something being left behind. But look closely at that assumption, and it starts to fall apart. Youth was intensity, yes. It was energy, possibility, a sense that anything could still happen. But intensity and happiness are not the same thing. Many of the most anxious, most turbulent years of a person's life happen precisely during youth, when identity is still forming, when every decision feels irreversible, when the future is a source of both excitement and dread in equal measure. Happiness, the quieter, steadier kind, is not a phase of life, it's a skill, and often a skill that takes decades to develop. It requires the very things that tend to accumulate with age: perspective, the ability to sit with uncertainty without panic, a reduced need for external validation, a more forgiving relationship with your own mistakes. In this light, the idea that happiness belongs to youth and fades with age gets the story backward. Youth is often where the raw materials for happiness are gathered, through experience, through failure, through love and loss, but the actual construction of a peaceful inner life tends to happen much later. Recognizing this reframes aging entirely. It's not a departure from happiness. For many people, it's the very first real arrival at it. The eighth truth touches something people rarely discuss honestly: the difference between loneliness and solitude, and why learning that difference changes everything about how these years feel. Loneliness is the ache of wanting connection and not having it. Solitude is something else entirely. It's the capacity to be alone without that ache, to sit with your own thoughts and actually enjoy the company. Many people spend their entire lives avoiding solitude, filling every quiet moment with noise, distraction, obligation, not because they're naturally social, but because being alone with an unexamined mind can feel unbearable. But solitude, once you learn to inhabit it rather than escape it, becomes one of the richest experiences available to a human being. It's where reflection happens. It's where you finally get to ask the questions that busyness has kept at bay for decades. And here is the quiet secret: people who have made peace with solitude are, paradoxically, far better company for others. They don't come to relationships starved, desperately extracting validation from every interaction. They come whole, choosing connection because they want it, not because they can't survive without it. Learning to enjoy your own presence is not a consolation prize for having fewer people around. It is, in many ways, the deepest form of self-respect a person can develop. The ninth and final truth is the one most people avoid thinking about directly, and yet it may be the most important one of all. Accepting the reality of mortality is not morbid, it is, strangely, one of the most life-affirming things a person can do. There is a particular kind of freedom that becomes available only once a person stops treating death as a distant, unmentionable threat and starts treating it as simply a fact, the boundary that gives shape and urgency to everything inside it. When mortality is denied, every year becomes an anxious defense against an enemy that cannot ultimately be defeated, and life quietly narrows around that fear. But when mortality is accepted, something shifts. Time stops being an enemy to be outrun and becomes, instead, a resource to be used wisely and gratefully. Small moments regain their weight. A conversation with someone you love is no longer background noise, it becomes something worth being fully present for, because presence is, in the end, the only currency that was ever truly yours. This truth doesn't ask for fear or sadness. It asks for honesty. And honesty about the ending of a story tends to make a person far more attentive to how the remaining chapters are written. Taken together, these 9 truths point towards something simple, even though each one on its own can take years to fully absorb. Aging well has very little to do with appearance, and almost everything to do with what a person is willing to release, the need for approval, the identification with a fading body, the desperate grip on certainty, the old grievances that no longer serve any purpose, the futile hope that others will change on your timeline, the guilt of protecting your own peace, the myth that happiness belongs only to the young, the fear of your own quiet company, and finally, the denial of the one truth that gives everything else its meaning. None of this happens overnight. It happens the way most real transformation happens, quietly, in private moments, in decisions nobody else witnesses, in the slow loosening of grips that were never actually serving you. If any part of this reached something real in you today, that alone is worth sitting with for a moment before moving on with your day. And if you'd like more of these reflections, the kind that don't shout for attention but quietly stay with you, consider subscribing, and feel free to share which of these 9 truths landed the deepest for you in the comments below. Sometimes the most honest conversations start exactly there.